especially in a coding bootcamp, you are learning so fast. And to take a step back and say like, oh my gosh, I this didn't click for me 3 weeks ago, but now it's like, I don't even think I don't even struggle with it anymore. And I guess maybe that was something that was helpful to, be like, okay, I don't really understand this totally right now, but like keep pushing, keep trying to learn, keep moving forward, and then it will click eventually.
Welcome to episode 11 of Sharing Developer Stories, hosted by TechRally. Today I talked to Chloe Lee, a Flatiron School alumni and my classmate who is now a senior software engineer at JobCase. I'm so excited to have her on and share her story. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sharing Developer Stories by TechRally. Today we're rewinding it back again to another Flatiron School classmate of mine. I haven't talked to her in a while, but we did reconnect and I'm so happy to catch up with her. Without further ado, here is Chloe Lee, a senior software engineer at JobCase. Chloe, it's been a hot minute. How have you been?
Good. And it's so great to reconnect, Alex. I'm so thankful for Flatiron for everything, but especially, connections like mine with yours and our classmates, and happy, to reconnect.
Yeah, it's always good reconnecting after I think it's been 6 years now, and that's a long time. But
yeah, it's kind of scary.
I know, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, though, we still have LinkedIn and all these other social platforms, so we could see kind of from a third party, like outside perspective of how people are doing. And I've kind of seen your LinkedIn, and you post a lot of great content there too. So I'm glad that you're doing so well.
Thanks, and likewise to you.
Yeah, thank you. For our listeners that may not know much about you, do you want to give us a little intro about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Chloe. Alex and I met at the Flatiron School we were just chatting a little bit earlier, but in 2015, which sounds so long ago and so crazy. So after Flatiron School, I actually went back to my at the time current employer, and I'll get into that later, I'm sure, but as a junior software engineer. And then moved on to my current company, JobCase, and I started as a software engineer and recently got promoted. And so that's kind of my background.
Yeah. And what did you do before doing software engineering?
Sure. So I'll back it up a long time ago. So I previously was at my old organization. I was in marketing, and I think I was in marketing for about 4.5 years. And I was at my organization for a long time. So I was an intern, and then right after graduation, I started full time on the marketing team, and then just kind of made my way onto the tech team.
Got it. And how did you get into the tech team? Because I know marketing and tech, there is some kind of crossover, but not necessarily the expectation that a marketing person needs to start writing code.
Totally. So I was really, really close with my boss, and still am today. She's, one of my really good friends, and we were always we always call each other sisters. But I felt so fortunate that, through my marketing career, we were always pretty transparent, and she really cared about my career path and my long-term goals. And so the type of marketing I was in was more so, I'd call it more partnership management. And so, there were a lot of, what I loved about it was getting to work internally across teams, cross-functionally within the organization, but then also with our partners. The thing that was super scary to me was going out in conferences or, networking events in New York, where I was at the time, and just walking up to people. And I guess, yeah, networking terrified me. And that was a
Right.
lot of the job. So long term, I was like, I don't think I'm really made for this. And I've learned a ton and loved it. But I think I would want to transition into a different role.
Right.
So she was like, okay, well, what is that? And I was like, well, that's the problem. So I don't really know exactly what. So she encouraged me to chat with a lot of people on in different fields. And she was like, it could be easy just for you to talk internally. So I chatted with like the product team, the data team. I never really thought about chatting with the tech team. And I chose those specific teams because I really liked the work in marketing that was more hard skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, thinking about, that's why I was like kind of leaning more towards product and data. But yeah, I never really thought about the tech team. And I was chatting with one of my friends on the tech team who's an engineer. And she was like, well, why not? Why don't you just try? And there's so many free resources online. Just see if you like it. You have nothing to lose. And so that's what I did. I did Code Academy, and I ended up loving it. I was doing it after work, before work, on the weekends. And I'm kind of the type of person who I'll get really, really into something for like 2 weeks or so. And then I'll be like, okay, that was fun. And then drop it. But
Right.
after like 2 months, I was still really, really into it. And so the organization that I was at, they knew I was doing these courses on my own, and they ended up sponsoring me to go to Flatiron School and then return as a junior engineer on the team. And my friend on the tech team who encouraged me to just, utilize the resources available to me and try it out, she ended up being my manager, which was awesome too.
Wow, that's such a great story. And did you want to go to a coding bootcamp school? Was that something that you thought would kind of get you over that hump, essentially?
Yeah, so actually I had never heard of coding boot camps before. And so I was just kind of like, yeah, coding on my own and thinking in the back of my mind, like, how is this going to work transitioning? And I'm so thankful to the organization and my friends at the organization, my manager, who just supported me and to take the leap, but then it's a step further to
Mm-hmm.
say, I just walked into a conference room one day and they were like, okay, we're going to sponsor you to go to this coding boot camp. And like, it was like, I like broke down crying immediately. It was like a Cinderella story, I feel like.
Right.
But yeah, so they really, just with their support and encouragement and, the resources and even cluing me into these coding boot camps, that's kind of how I found Flatiron.
Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity for sure. So before I ask this question, I do want to just put a disclaimer out there. We went to a coding bootcamp school back in 2015, so we're obviously in 2021, 6 years later. So our experiences might be a little bit different. But for you, what was your experience at Flatiron School like?
Yeah. So at first I was really scared because I don't know if you, before you
We
went
all were.
into the boot camp, yeah, I
I
feel
think we
like
all were scared.
you hear that it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much work. And, you're
Right.
going to be there all day, like 9 to
Every
6
day.
every day.
Yeah.
And then you have homework and then labs. And then
Yeah.
on the weekend, you'll work on that.
You
So
basically
I was,
don't have a life.
yeah. Yeah, you don't have a life. But the surprising thing, I guess, was that, and, you went through this, but there's so many peaks and valleys.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the surprising thing was, yes, it was a lot of work, but what I appreciated about Flatiron that, it was a lot of work, but it was work that I felt like I really wanted to do. It was hard. It was stressful when you didn't understand things, but it was, you wanted to be there. And what I appreciated about Flatiron was the community that they built and, the empathy. I think that was one thing that drew me towards Flatiron specifically over other coding boot camps. And I think like wasn't it the first 1 or 2 days? Well, the first thing that Avi said to us was like, if you're a mean person, you can just like leave, and I thought that was,
I don't even remember him saying that. But
I thought, I think he was like kind of, yeah, he said that maybe the first day. And I think that struck me because I was like, wow, like that's awesome. We're here to support each other and not compete with each other. Especially, and I thought that was awesome, especially how intense the 3 months were going to be. Really building that community from the first day of, we're here to learn together, support each other. You might understand something one day that nobody else understands, but that could flip flop the next day. And so lean on each other, teach each other, help each other. So that's what I loved about Flatiron. I think we also, do you remember, maybe it was the first or second day that we did improv or something? And I think that was, to like trust each other, community building. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
I think the two things that probably brought us a lot closer together was that and Feelings Friday, but we could definitely talk more about that.
Feelings Friday for sure.
Feelings Friday. But those two, they definitely built a lot of infrastructure and emphasis around the community for us at the time, because we had a physical location. We were I think at that time there was no overlapping, or they were just starting to do overlapping cohorts. So just a lot of attention to the cohorts at the time, I think, was really important. But weirdly enough, I feel like a lot of the people or the classmates were all in very similar situations. I would say a small percentage, or I would say a majority of the percentage, like we've all had jobs before and we're kind of doing that career switch into something else. So a lot of very similar positions, similar mindsets, and similar goals, but not always competitive like you were mentioning. But for me at least, I know I went through what you kind of describes as like ebbs and flows, or like ups and downs. There were moments when I was struggling really, really hard. How did you feel during those times?
Yeah, I probably was the person in the class, I think. I could say this probably with certainty that I don't know how to say this, but I want to be like the dumbest person in the class, but I don't know, like the one who just like, it didn't click for me as much as everybody else. But I feel like that was kind of the learning point for me in Flatiron was, even though you might not understand this and, other people are really understanding it, it's okay. And, that's what tech is. It's like, and I don't know if this was in a previous episode or not, so sorry if I'm stealing the statement or repeating it, but it's like learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think, that was the biggest learning for me. And even to this day, we were talking before this, but, I still feel like a newbie 6 years later, and there's so much to learn. But that's what tech is. There's always something to learn. And that's what's so exciting about tech too, is that, you're never going to be the smartest one. You can always learn from anyone. Like, my previous CTO, he was like, I can learn just as much from you as a junior dev. And, you can teach me something too. And so everybody can always share. And I think, in Flatiron, especially because our cohort was so supportive and so nice, I felt like, even though I'm not getting this, it's okay at the end of the day. And just like try as hard as you can and, do your due diligence and research as much as you can online. And if you get stuck, then there's always somebody that you can ask or bounce ideas off of.
Right. And I like to say always code with like a beginner's mentality, because there's always something that you don't know, no matter how long you've been in the industry. Even for us, 6 years, it sounds like a long time, but I'm sure there's just so many things that we don't know more than what we know. So I totally agree with that statement. for you, I know we were talking about a moment like when it didn't click. When was that moment for you when things started clicking? And was it during the boot camp? Maybe was it after when you got your first job and you kind of are connecting all those things together? What was your experience when that aha moment came?
Yeah, I don't know if it like was a particular moment that that stands out. Well, actually, so I guess I didn't realize in the moment.
Mm. Mm.
It was kind
Right.
of when we were going through labs, and then we had to build on our knowledge. And there were things that I was really stuck on at the beginning, but then progressing and doing labs that we had to build on the knowledge. And I was like, oh, I really do understand that. Or taking a step back, and because especially in a coding boot camp, you are learning so fast, and to take a step back and say like, oh my gosh, I this didn't click for me 3 weeks ago, but now it's like I don't even think I don't need to struggle with it anymore. And I guess maybe that was something that was helpful to be like, okay, I don't really understand this totally right now, but like keep pushing, keep trying to learn, keep moving forward, and then it will click eventually. And I guess it took that moment for me to just take a step back and reflect a little bit.
Right. I think some coding boot camps these days, they've kind of adapted their curriculum to go a little bit longer than 3 months. 3 months is nice in a sense that if you could get a job after 3 months, that's amazing. But you're also putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do a lot in 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's just so much information to your point about not understanding, but keep moving forward. I still remember being behind on so many labs, and they're like, okay, we'll just go to the next section. And that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a
Which seemed
major
kind of like,
struggle.
what? Like, what? I don't understand this. So you want me to keep going? But it's like, sometimes it's, the tunnel vision. And,
Hmm.
sometimes when I'm really stuck, even to this day, it's like, okay, maybe I've been staring at this for too long, and I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because it's probably something that's so obvious.
Hmm.
But because I've been staring at the same code for hours, sometimes it doesn't help you. So taking a step away um, can help you. And that's
Right.
happened a lot of times for me when I've revisited things, and I was like, oh my god, duh. So
Yeah, exactly. I think our brain just can take up so much capacity to learn. And even before Flatiron School, I think we're programmed, no pun intended, in a way that we have to know everything within this section. It's kind of like school, right? You just have to make sure you know these chapters, and then you take a test on it and you feel confident. But with coding bootcamp, when we went, it was just here's this blob of knowledge or a material, try to get as much as you can, then we'll keep moving forward. And,
yeah.
and I think a lot of us that are used to just wanting to make sure we know everything before we move on, that was a huge struggle. Because I remember learning Sinatra, and a lot of us were trying to master Sinatra before they introduced us to Rails. It's like, oh, we don't really need to know Sinatra. It's good to know that it exists and how they do it at a high level, but maybe we didn't have to go so in depth to really be like, oh, how does this actually work, right? So
Yeah.
I think that would be an advice I would give to any aspiring developers, that you don't have to know everything right off the bat. Just make sure you just understand the fundamentals.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
one of the things that probably I also experienced was a huge amount of imposter syndrome. Is this really right for me? I mean, I moved from California or Texas to New York. So in some ways, I really questioned myself. I don't know if it was because of the weather, also because it was snowing then. I didn't have any real good shoes. I definitely was not prepared to live in New York. But on top of that, being in an environment where I'm just constantly, that pressure is so high to apparently become a software engineer after 3 months. I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. Did you also feel that too? And how did you kind of get over that hump?
Oh, totally. And I think that I still feel imposter syndrome. And I think it goes back to, um, just learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I think, unfortunately, I feel like, you know, it imposter syndrome doesn't really go away. But what helps for me is just being open about it and chatting with people, saying like, oh, I feel like, I should know this. And like, why don't I know this? Or, do I really deserve this title if I made a major mistake yesterday? But I think being gracious with yourself and, if sometimes, I even find myself saying like, oh, why did that take me so long? Or, trying to make something perfect. But sometimes you just have to get the MVP out, the most valuable product out, and, fail fast. And if you make mistakes, it's not the end of the world, and you fix it. And there's bugs all the time. Things are always changing, and so just trying to be a little gracious with yourself. But at Flatiron, what you alluded to before, Feelings Friday, that really helped me a lot too.
Right.
Which I think was the point of it. And so I guess for those who don't know, who probably
Right.
a lot of people don't know what Feelings Fridays are. It was basically we ended the week. The last thing on Friday, we would sit around in a circle and just go around and say how we felt. It didn't have to be related to coding. It could be just something in life that was really stressful. So I think that was really helpful in terms of showing you that you weren't alone in the down moments, and that building empathy for each other in our cohort. And when you were getting something, it didn't feel great to hear that your coworker was really, or not coworker, but cohort member, who, I guess
Colleagues,
your
colleagues, or
colleagues,
cohorts, or
cohorts,
friends, whatever.
yeah,
Who knows
friends.
at that moment? Blurring the lines.
Exactly. But yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
feel good to
Yeah.
hear that other people were down and struggling. So it was like, okay, well, if I understand this, how can
Hmm.
we come together and work on it together? Or, if for a lot of the cases, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't get this at all. I can't believe, because I was sponsored by my organization, I was like, I'm letting them down. I'm wasting their money. I'm wasting their time. But, again, it's not like I wanted to hear that other people were struggling, but hearing other people's feelings and opening up, it's like, okay, maybe I'm not alone in this, which helped.
Right. Right. And yeah, you're alluding to something that is maybe not as talked about too much, but I feel that people, especially self-taught developers that are kind of working on this right now, they don't value the concept of a community. It's actually very sociable to be, or it requires a lot of social skills to be a software engineer, because you're going to be talking to product managers, you're going to be talking to people. You need to talk to all these other stakeholders to make sure you're coding the right thing. But at the same time, the fact that you have other people can definitely keep you going. But sometimes that's why I always encourage any self-taught engineers to try to find a community, go on Slack or go on Discord, find a group that you could kind of work with. That way you don't feel like this is such a lonely process, because it's so hard. And being able to express ourselves, the struggles and whatnot on those Fridays was actually probably kept me going, because there were moments where I really wanted to give up. But just having friends that would, maybe misery loves company mindset, where we're all kind of struggling together, made it
Mhm.
so much easier to feel like, okay, I could possibly do this. And that is something that I still to this day really treasure, because it's one of those, you can't have those moments again, in my opinion, with those exact kind of people and at that exact time. So definitely
Mhm.
appreciate that. And yeah, I think you hit on so many points, where even as new developers, we have this pressure to, we only have this one shot and one opportunity, and if we don't do it, then I'm not going to be a software developer. But that's so far from the case. And I think as we gain more experience, we've been doing this for 6 years, and we know we're not the best software engineers, but we kind of are okay with it. We just move on, we'll learn, we'll send out the MVP. I personally, I've been working at my company for about a month and a half now, and sometimes I don't even feel like I should be here. And I always ask so much help because I'm trying to understand the whole infrastructure and all these new tooling that they use internally. And it's such a big learning curve for me too.
Mhm.
And it's I know where my strengths are at, but I have so many other weaknesses that I definitely do reach out and ask for help, because there's really nothing wrong with asking for help. It's one thing that I personally liked about our coding bootcamp, at least in 2015, was there was no concept of grades.
Yeah.
So there was no motive to kind of cheat or copy other people's code. So it was just like, if you understand it, you understand it. If you don't, then you have to ask for help. I don't know how much has changed now since we did it, but I think that was so important to me because at least back in college, I was so motivated to get good grades that I would go at different lanes to try to do it, whether it's like looking at the back of the book or find a solutions manual and just to get a good grade. But here it was just one of those things where I was okay being uncomfortable and asking for help. And I still to this day do that. And then the last thing I want to mention is the empathy part. It's so important because I went through some kind of bad experiences myself where I was near a brilliant developer, but very difficult to work with. I would put in
Mhm.
my pull request. He would just kind of crap on it and just rewrite my whole code, and literally felt like I just wasted my day. And even though I was learning, I didn't realize it because I just felt so bad about myself. And I kind of adopted that mindset into my next job, which was good in a sense that I was able to kind of command the room. But eventually, no one wants to work with someone that's difficult to interact with and have a normal conversation with. And if you're always aggressive saying, why do I have to do this? Or these designs aren't right. That empathy part is also super important. So I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that part as well.
Yeah, and that reminds me, it's like I would way rather work with somebody who's curious and wants to collaborate versus like someone who's going to be difficult to work with or and who's knows all the answers, but like you said, is difficult
Right.
to work with because it is so collaborative and you know, I think, when I was a junior engineer, I really appreciated my team and especially the senior engineers because when I'm sure it was awful code. And, instead of them like kind of being like, why would you do it that way? It was kind of, I guess, kind of the same words, but kind of like, oh, that's an interesting way to do
In a
it. Like,
different way.
yeah, like, can you,
It
like,
really
what
is a skill.
yeah, like what was your like why did you choose to write it this way, because like out of
Mhm.
curiosity and I think that empathy and there was no arrogance in the tone of like why did you do it that way. It was kind of like more exploration of and like I love what you said, code as you're a beginner. It was these senior engineers saying why did you choose to do it that way, just curious, and then it was
Mhm.
and then they're like, oh, okay, like here's another way to do it, and I was like, oh, that's way better, and but
Right.
it's even pointing that out and listening to my reasoning, but then also saying like here's another way. You just learn so much by collaborating and see different points of views and then become better too.
Right. Either way, you still get the same end result, but how you do it is so important because the confidence of a junior developer or aspiring developer at that time is probably very low, and you're already going to be pushing them down even harder because of the way you say certain things, right? Or you could be uplifting and to ask them like, "Hey, can you kind of explain to me your thoughts?" And then you're actually having an honest discussion, and then the next time they'll remember that and hopefully they'll adjust to it for the next PR or whatever. But what I felt, I mean, it is what it is, but what I felt was I was kind of coding on eggshells at that point, and I
Yeah,
didn't feel that I wanted to write code because I was just kind of, apparently it's going to get written anyway. So what's the point of writing it? And that's
yeah,
so tough. Yeah.
yeah. Even
But
today, there was like some context of, like in PRs, you might not have all the context. There was like a cleanup ticket that I was going through, and I was like, oh, why are we, some method was being renamed, and then in the cleanup ticket, but then it was never called, and so I was like, I was like, why do we even have this in the code? And so, just instead of being like, oh, we can delete that, get rid of it. I was asking my teammate, and I was like, asked her why, and she was like, oh, context is we're probably going to reuse this later. We're not using it now, but instead of rewriting it later, we're going to use it again soon. So just leave it in. And so, I mean, that's like a really tiny example, but sometimes you don't have all the context for decisions either. So good to explore.
Right. So I think we talked about a lot where we kind of benefited from having some empathetic senior developers. But in general, if someone was trying to kind of just start off, we did a coding bootcamp school in 2015. Maybe fast forward to 2021. If someone's trying to learn how to code now, what would you recommend?
I think, just learning. I think, again, there are so many free resources online. So be it YouTube channels or videos or a code academy, there's like endless amount. So I think starting there, I guess they're all virtual now with the pandemic, but meetups I think are really awesome because you can, again, like I said, I hate networking and it scares me so much. But they are amazing communities out there that you can meet people who are just learning like yourself, or want to help somebody, or might know of a course that you can't find online, or like a study group or something. I've also joined a few Slack groups, or Slack groups, I guess, like Women Who Code Boston, and various other ones that have dedicated Slack. So they have channels like jobs, or I think there is even like programming questions, like just like kind of questions of the day, or kind of like a more intimate Stack Overflow, I guess. Like, has anyone had this issue? Like you said, there's coding is so awesome because there's so many awesome communities of people you might not even meet, like, on Slack Overflow, but they just, I guess, kind of going full circle, I think that they're such awesome communities because they love to code. They've also been in someone's shoes, either feeling imposter syndrome and want to give back to the community, or, it's like, oh man, that was a really nasty problem that I encountered. So like, maybe I should see if anyone else has running into this issue on Stack Overflow, and I can help them with an answer, or post this so no one else has to go through the pain that I went through.
Right. And we should definitely, or I'll definitely add those in the description, whether on those Slack groups that you were mentioning, because I think that would be pretty cool to join those kind of similar groups for like-minded people. And maybe that could benefit maybe one or two or more of the viewers here. I have one coding question for you. I always, these days, I see some videos or people saying that Ruby's dead or whatever, which I don't agree with, because I feel like a lot of companies still use it. What are your thoughts on Ruby, maybe Ruby on Rails, and just the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm currently using Ruby. So when I went back to my organization, we were using PHP and Laravel. So after Flatiron, where we focused on Ruby and Rails and JavaScript, I totally switched gears to my new full-time job that was in a different language. So that didn't help with imposter syndrome. Trying to learn a whole new language that wasn't taught in our boot camp, but they're pretty similar. But now I'm back to Ruby and Rails, and I don't think it's dead. I don't think my team thinks it's dead. I think we're doing really cool things with Ruby and Rails still that, for us, it works and our product. But it is kind of funny because my little cousin is a junior at BU, and he is a computer science major. And when I told him when I got this new job, and he was like, "What are you coding in Ruby, Rails?" And I said Ruby and Rails, and he was like, "Ugh, people still use that." So, I guess it's kind of It's up for debate. What are your
I know
thoughts on
he's young, but you should teach him a little empathy as well. Just kidding.
it? That's so true.
No, but I completely agree. I feel that need to pick the right technology for the job. And yeah, there are some whatever limitations with Ruby and Ruby on Rails when potentially you're going to be scaling to the size of Twitter. And we've kind of heard those stories before. But depending on what you need to do, I think you just got to pick the right technology for your team, like the expertise and whatnot. So I think Ruby is perfectly fine. It's a really beautiful language, in my opinion. It was very easy for me to learn as a first language. I
Mhm.
primarily work in JavaScript now, and it's gotten a lot better because of because of Ruby on Rails in a sense, because they had CoffeeScript, and I see a lot of similar kind of syntax that JavaScript adapted to from ES5 to ES6. A lot of it, I'm sure, was inspired by CoffeeScript. So I think there definitely is a time and a place for it. So I'm on that perspective. Even PHP and Laravel, there's still a lot of older technologies that require engineers to work on. So let's not try to discredit some of the other languages that may not be as popular or whatnot, or just this new shiny tool. I think one of the benefits of having tried and tested technologies is that you know how it works and you know how it scales. Sometimes
Mhm.
with the newer stuff, you're kind of guessing, you're not quite sure yet,
Mhm.
and maybe there aren't as many libraries that support it. So there's just all these things that you might have to build by yourself because it's such a new framework or such a new language that no one has actually worked on it. There's no community. All of that is super important. So definitely on that side. I do have one question for you because I know you mentioned you went from one organization to your current job. How was that for you to go back into the job market, start interviewing and whatnot?
Yeah. So that's a great question because so after boot camp, the organization that I was at, I really loved it, and I was, kind of play by the rules. Like if you still believe in what you're doing, the mission, and or what the company does, if you like your coworkers, and you're still learning, then those kind of things, I'm like, well, why would you find a new job? For me. So that was the case. I was still learning. I still really believed in the mission of the organization, and I still loved my coworkers. But with that said, so as I mentioned before, I was an intern, and then right after college, that was my full-time job, and so I was there for 8 years. And job case, I got a message on LinkedIn from job case, and that really a recruiting message, but job case really stuck out to me because of the mission. And so I was like, okay, like, I've been here for 8 years. Maybe it's time for me to look at other companies because, just getting diversity in workplaces, especially my first job too. So I went through the process and really liked the team, really liked the mission. And it was such a hard decision because, again, it was like I loved my team. I loved the mission. I was still learning. So um, but I decided, it was the right career move in terms of, seeing what a different company looked like. And when I told my manager at the time, she was like, I mean, we love you. But I was kind of thinking, like, when is she going to like look for another job? To just kind of, she was like, I mean that in the best way. Like, I want you to develop your
Zero, yeah.
career,
Right.
you don't have to stay here forever. So it
Hmm.
was really bittersweet to leave. But I've been super, super happy at my new job. But just, I think, so I guess the moral of that is just to be open to conversations and talking to different companies. If you get reached out to, and just see, if you apply to somewhere, you don't, and you get it, you don't have to take it necessarily. So I think it's always good to just kind of
Right.
take
Right.
opportunities when they come to you.
Right. I think most software developers have the opposite effect of moving companies too fast. And if anything, we might be the anomalies because I stayed at my company for almost 5 years and you stayed with 8. But the bigger question I had for you was, did you literally interview at one company and get the job right away? Or did you have to go through like a process? Because I know I had to go through a gauntlet of rejections before I got a yes, but it sounded like you might have 100% success rate or something.
No, no, no. So I also was in the mindset, thinking about, it's the only company I've ever been at,
Mhm,
and for 8 years. And I was like, okay, I have this luxury right now that I don't need a new job ASAP.
mhm,
So with time on my side, I took a lot of conversations and started the interview process, uh, for companies that I was interested in, but also knowing that, my first interviews I wasn't going to get the offer. So I just took them, went through the process and looked at it as like kind of practice and,
right.
you know, going through code tests, which are really scary, and code interviews,
Yeah.
which, yeah, are really, really intimidating. But again, that was kind of, starting the process of practicing, going through interviews, and especially code interviews.
Right. It's really cool that you already were thinking ahead about those things because I, for me, when I started, I actually interviewed at a company. My first interview when I started looking for a job was a company I wanted to work at, which is generally a bad idea because you don't realize how rusty you are.
Mhm.
And I thought I did really well, and I made it to the final round, but I realized there are certain things you still need to practice, whether it's sharing your story, making sure you tell the right story, and also your technical skills, maybe not necessarily how to code, but how you interact with other people in an interview context is a little different, and just asking for clarity. All of these little things and practice I probably could have done better, but I'm not going to complain where I am now. But it's just like that timing and how you practice is so important. So it's really cool that you put in the reps before you found something that you really do enjoy.
Yeah, I also had my friend is a CTO at a company, and he was looking to hire engineers, and
Mhm.
he asked me if he could test out the coding exercise, and I was like, yes.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, so taking any opportunity, I was like, I need to practice too.
Yeah.
And so and he was like, was that too hard, was that, and he was like, thanks for so much. And I was like, no, thank you, because
Mhm.
all the practice that you can get, I think, is
Right.
good, especially when you're interviewing. Sometimes, at least for me, when put on the spot, one of my first interviews that I didn't get the job, it was a pairing exercise, and he was driving, and he was like, just talk to me what you do. And it was a different language that I didn't know. And
Hmm.
I just froze up because I was so
Yeah.
nervous. So,
Right.
even if you know things, it doesn't hurt to practice and get used to kind of explaining your thought
Right.
process and whatnot.
I- Definitely the reps help. And I kind of found myself, even when I'm, to your point, about to fail or just know that it's not going to work out, I just kind of do it gracefully somewhat. And I think that just comes with practice and just realizing that it's going to be okay. But
Mhm.
maybe like old Alex and old Chloe coming out of a boot camp, we think this is our only shot and only opportunity, but definitely far from the case. And one thing I like to emphasize with people that break into the space, if you do get a job offer, I would highly recommend taking the offer if you even if it may not be ideal, because then you have that luxury of getting paid but also learning, but also you could interview a little with not that weight on your shoulders of, oh, I can't land my first job, the first job always kind of puts you in a position to make it easier to get that second job. But
Mhm.
that early gap is so much harder because you just feel a ton of pressure to actually work professionally. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, I mean, from personally, I think, if you're looking for a job, you don't want to, if it's going to be, if you hate the company or you
Oh,
get really
right.
bad vibes, like, of course, like,
Of course, yeah.
don't take it. But I think, looking at everything as an opportunity to learn and get experience. And it's not like you're selling your life away and you're going to work there forever.
Right.
I think getting that experience for being on a team, especially right after boot camp, and seeing what it's like to be full time on a team and doing it for a living, I think that's a great opportunity in itself. So hard,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
to just take it, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. And I had another question for you, actually, related to your job and maybe just in general to our listeners that may be a little bit more on the experience side, but not quite senior yet. What do you think is the biggest difference between a senior and mid-level engineer? I know you just got that senior title on you as well, so just curious to hear your opinions on it.
Yeah. So senior, then mid level, up or down? Do you mean?
Maybe like senior, and then maybe someone that's trying to get to senior but not quite hitting those marks yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think being a mentor to others, and it doesn't have to be formal, but I think being I guess being willing and excited about the collaboration. And I guess that's not, necessarily to level up, but I think if, you are there as a resource to others, that
Hmm.
kind of makes you stand out as someone who can get to that next level. Um,
Right.
Being able to be like a go-to person, for example, or being a good person to collaborate with maybe some junior folks on your team. I think being really staying curious all the time, and not being kind of like, well, I don't really know this, so but it works, but like being curious, going that extra
Mm.
step. If you get something to work, being like, well, why does this work? And documenting and sharing knowledge. I also think something that's really important is being able to be a cross-functional member on the team. So not only, a resource to other engineers, but to non-engineers that you work with. I think that also makes you stand out as like going to as the go-to person for someone, a
Right.
designer or someone on the marketing team, or whoever your teams might work with. I think being able to work with them well, being able to communicate in a non-technical way what's going on. I think that also is a good way to kind of stand out. And if you can explain in a non-technical way and work with other teams, I think that just shows how much you know technically as well.
Right, right. There is a aspect of it that's not fully technical that you're kind of alluding to, and just to kind of piggyback off of that, I know some people they say, "Oh, it's not a jack of all trades, you're a master of none." But in this case, a senior developer kind of has to be a jack of all trades in a sense of being able to communicate more clearly with the proper stakeholders, whether it's product managers or even higher levels than that. But at the same time, you got to level with the junior developers to kind of guide them. In my opinion, juniors or mids, they are they're at least the juniors. They're trying to understand how to do certain tasks. Mid levels, you can kind of leave them alone and they'll do the tasks. But the senior developers, they are thinking about the tasks, or is this scalable? Is this something we
Mhm.
can do? And if there are things that are just people are hitting a wall, generally a senior developer will may not if even if they don't get it right away, there's some calmness about the way they approach it and being able to eventually figure something out to make it work, whether it's you have to make certain sacrifices or whatever it is, but you're kind of making that decision with obvious discussions with the rest of the team. Overall, it's kind of I don't want to say it's like the voice of reason, but it kind of has that calmness to it when you have like a senior developer and that reliability, knowing that your team is kind of in that steady ship, as
Mhm.
opposed to like there's too many tickets everywhere. What do we do? Like, are we actually doing things correctly? Are we wasting time? Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a senior, I felt at least at my last company, I felt that there was just a lot of technical choices that needed to be discussed, and sometimes maybe the junior developers being in that room is not a good usage of their time because
Yep.
they might not fully understand what's going on from not just a technical perspective, but from a product perspective of where we want to go. So
Yeah.
I think that totality of what you just described and what I described together is a pretty good, for like a pretty good example of what a good senior developer is.
Totally. And I think, like, I guess, what you mentioned all, I totally agree with. And I think, in terms of if you're aspiring to be a senior engineer, I think what has helped for me is to take on things that people don't want to do necessarily. So, when I first started my job, I was very overwhelmed with everything going on. Like you said, the ramp up. So I kind of laughed because my manager would be like, "Oh, thanks so much for taking that on." And I was like, "Well, I don't really know anything anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I have to learn anything." And so,
Right.
if there is one app that I don't know, I get the sense that it was kind of a legacy app that got passed down, and I think just kind of all over the place. And I don't think many people want to touch that. So I started getting, my boss was started assigning me tickets, and I was like, great, like, let's learn this. Because again, I had to learn everything anyway, but really stepping in to that role, and then with fresh eyes, and being the developer that was willing, and I was excited to learn the app, I guess maybe because I didn't know better. But I when we were refactoring or redesigning it, that's when I got to take a look at the code, and I think naturally, because being willing to do something that wasn't as sexy, or maybe that nobody else wanted to do, I spent more time on it, and learning and asking questions like, why do we have to do this? This seems really complicated, and then ended up totally simplifying it. But I think that opened a door to this opportunity to be able to refactor a big legacy app and take real ownership on it. And I think had somebody else on the team who was there prior to me had wanted to or showed more interest in it, then I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So, even projects that seem really hard or that nobody else wants to do, I think definitely take it. And then you can show how you can take ownership on things and kind of level yourself up.
Right. I was going to end with a closing theme or a question, but I kind of want to just end it there because, man, you make up a really good point where it's about taking ownership, being curious. All of these things are characteristics that I think any person that's trying to get that junior developer role should have, but it also shouldn't mean just because we're experienced or senior, we shouldn't lose that interest and curiosity. So no, I really loved it. And just, like you said, ownership and curiosity, I think that really does make you stand out from the rest of the pack, being able to make huge or big impactful decisions when obviously no one's working on it. So when changes are made, they could see it right away that you've kind of clearly done something to improve the state of your application or the state of your products. So I really like that advice.
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
Before we end, I want to ask you if people want to contact you or get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? Any social links you want to
yeah.
share?
Probably my LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
is best. I'm not really active on Twitter. So yeah, I think LinkedIn would be awesome.
Cool. I'll make sure to add that in the YouTube description. But yeah, this was super fun, Chloe, and I really, really appreciate your time. It's super fun, and I was gonna say it's always so much fun, but it's been a while. But it's really fun catching up with an old classmate, and it's even better to see that that classmate doing so well in their career. For the rest of you that are here, I want to say I'll see you in the next episode. But thank you again, Chloe. I'll see you later.
Thank you
Bye.
so much, Alex. This was awesome and great to catch up with you.
Always. Bye.
Bye.